Hey everybody, it's Dr. Leith. I'm going to go over schizophrenia and the other thought disorders, also known as the psychotic disorders from the DSM-5. This is a really interesting chapter because here we're going into the place where clients might be experiencing delusions and hallucinations and disorganized speech and behavior and things like that. So this is also where the term psychosis plays, right? And so there are these 5 symptoms that make up psychosis. Delusions, which is a false belief, right, that is not explained by the client's culture or education or development, like magical thinking in children. Clients have a hard time being persuaded that the belief is incorrect, and this might be things that I believe that I am the King of the United States. I believe I am Jesus Christ. I believe that I have superpowers and that everybody knows me. Right? I believe that the government is speaking to me through, through signals in fast food advertisements and things like that. Hallucinations, on the other hand, are false sensory perception experiences. So this is seeing things, hearing things, and it can be all the senses. So seeing things like I feel like I see people watching me. I feel like I hear people talking about me. I hear voices. False smells, right? False taste. I might feel like I have bugs crawling all over me, so that's touch, right? But that's not there. Disorganized behavior. So physical actions that are not goal-directed, and I'm going to give an example or encourage you to look up an example in a few slides. But this might be, someone who strips down in public or runs through a hallway screaming for no reason, repeatedly doing the same thing over and over, not due to like OCD or a culturally sanctioned process. Disorganized speech and thinking. So someone who speaks in associations or goes off on tangents, speaks only in rhymes, word salad, right? They just make up a series of words or neologisms, right? They make up a completely new word, right? But their speech and their thinking, or speech and or thinking, is disorganized. And negative symptoms. Now you'll remember negative symptoms was a set in the PTSD chapter. Here what we mean is negative as in something has been taken away, as though they can't express emotions, they don't experience joy, anhedonia, they don't have an interest in things. So something negative as in they are lacking something that we would expect them to have. The other concept that comes out of this chapter is bizarre, right? So kind of like with trauma, the DSM describes what bizarre is, and that would be delusions that are clearly implausible or not understandable. So it is one thing to believe, for example, in like aliens, which is very common. I'm not suggesting that is a delusion, again, on a spectrum. Then there's the delusion that everybody knows me, I'm famous, right? It's a delusion, but not bizarre. And then a bizarre one would be somebody has removed all of my internal organs and replaced them with machine parts, right? Something that's clearly not possible or plausible. So let's start with delusional disorder. So this is interesting because this is the only combination that I know of in the DSM that you cannot diagnose this and schizophrenia at the same time. Here, the person has delusions, but none of the other symptoms of schizophrenia. So no hallucinations, disorganized speech, disorganized behavior, or the negative symptoms, right? It's just delusions. The person's functions are not markedly impaired. So what does that mean? That means the person has delusions, but they are still able to live their life, right? So this person is still going to work, they still have relationships, but they have this false belief, and their behavior is not bizarre. So going back, their behavior is not implausible, it's not disorganized, it's not completely out of sorts, and the delusion itself is not bizarre. And so then we specify the type of delusions. And so this is just to kind of give you an idea of what delusions sound like. Erotomanic. So the central theme, and that's probably the best way of classifying delusions is by going by theme, is that the person believes that another person loves them. So this might be, I think that some famous actress is in love with me and she's communicating with me when she's on screen, right? What kind of behavior do you think this can lead to? Yes, stalking type behavior, such as like with Jodie Foster or the actress from NCIS, I think, had one. But this idea that we're meant to be together and she loves me, I know she does, I just need to get to her and we can figure this all out. Grandiosity, almost like narcissism, but even more so here, it's having some unrecognized talent, or there's some great importance the person has, and this is where like everybody knows me, I've got it figured out, I have special powers, I can do anything. But it's to the point where this is not just having confidence, this is, yeah, I'm so strong I can lift a car, right? Jealousy, right? So the delusion that despite all evidence, there is a unwavering belief that their spouse is being unfaithful. Now, jealousy, again, lots of people have jealousy. Not everybody who has jealousy has delusional disorder. This would be someone who they are having to watch their partner 24/7. And what kind of concerns would we expect with this? You're right. Domestic violence, right? Or interpersonal violence. Because the person is convinced that you are cheating, right? That when we went to Sonic, when you ordered an ocean water, that was code to your lover who's working there. That when we went to the grocery store, the way you said, "Hi, how are you?" to the cashier was indicative of your relationship. So it is much more than maybe someone who's just sensitive towards the idea of cheating or infidelity. Persecutory. So this is, they're being conspired against. People are out to get me. The infamous them. Right? They're trying to take me or my ideas. So I worked with an older client who was convinced, as she was doing her dissertation, that the FBI was beaming lasers into her ears to steal her research, and that they were sending, people to try and confiscate her computer and things like that. So that was a delusion. Then she started, she claimed she saw people or heard people talking about her. She saw people spying on her. And so now that's where we're maybe kind of treading into hallucination, seeing things that are not there. It can also be people are believing that my food is poisoned, I can't trust people, right? Again, though, this is despite maybe evidence, but it's a false belief. And then somatic. Somatic is when it deals with bodily functions and sensations. So having the delusions that all of my body parts are machines, or that I'm a robot, or that there's, bugs inside of me and things like that. Now we move on to, again, this is like PTSD, where there's a spectrum. There's kind of a timeline for these next few with schizophrenia. Brief psychotic disorder, you got to have at least one of the following: delusions, hallucinations, or disorganized speech. And it lasts 1 to 30 days, and there's an assumption that the person can and will return to their previous level of functioning. And a really good example from 2012 that you can YouTube is Jason Russell. If you remember the political movement of Coney 2012, Jason Russell was an activist who wanted to end the conscription of child soldiers in Africa, and he went on this very big campaign that got a lot of traction, a lot of attention, and then he started getting a lot of really negative feedback, and I think he has an Oprah interview as well, where he explains that at some point he went to the movies with his wife and child, and he felt that the characters on screen were speaking to him, and then eventually this culminates with him in, I forget the city, but it's in California, where he has stripped down and he is essentially just doing calisthenics and yoga and kind of rambling just in his underwear and very out of control. And so that would be an example of disorganized speech, disorganized behavior, right? The stripping down in public and acting that way. And then the hallucinations that he's hearing these characters talk to him, or he believes that they're talking to him for delusions. And this lasted, I think he said, for about 2 weeks before he kind of got recentered. But you can YouTube Jason Russell breakdown and see what disorganized speech and behavior looks like. And then if you want more information, you can also look up his Oprah interview where she asks him, tell me what's going on. But that would be an example of brief psychotic disorder because it came on suddenly and then alleviated before 30 days. And what we specify, and is with the case with Jason Russell, is it with marked stressors or without? In his case, I would be confident saying it is, that he had all this national, if not worldwide, attention on him. He is now suddenly responsible for the success of this very big thing, lots of criticism, and just kind of got to that point, right? So you might remember from, was it the 90s with the Postal Service, right? When we say like going postal, where there were workers who just kind of got to the point of acting in a disorganized way. And we still see that, where somebody kind of gets just to a point where they have lost touch with reality. And that's what's happening here. Without marked stressors, so there wouldn't be that. And with postpartum onset within 4 weeks of pregnancy. Or delivering, I should say. Schizophreniform comes next. So 1 to 6 months. And we need at least one of the top 3 delusions, hallucinations, or disorganized speech, plus one more. Right? So very similar, but now it needs to last for a month to 6 months. And then after 6 months, it becomes schizophrenia. Right? Where we need, again, 2 or more of the following, with at least one of them being delusions, hallucinations, or disorganized speech. I have these out of order. And so with all of these, what do you think we need to rule out most? Yeah, we need to rule out substances, right? And make sure that they are not in the throes of the effects of some drug, whether it's prescription or illicit or street. And we need to rule out culturally sanctioned behaviors, right? Because one person's delusion is another person's religion, right? So we need to make sure that what they're describing to us is not, in fact, indicative of their culture. And remember, culture has a lot of different meanings to it, including religion and spirituality, and making sure that we're not pathologizing an otherwise culturally sanctioned behavior. You would specify for all of them whether the person had catatonia. And just like with panic attack, catatonia is not an independent diagnosis. You would say schizophrenia with catatonia. And so the DSM lists what these are. I won't go through all of them, but these are behavioral things. You need to have 3 of them. So are they kind of in a stupor? Are they not talking? Does it look like they are frozen? Or are they being waxy, meaning you can pose them? Does it look like they're having to fight gravity, or are they grimacing all the time? Do they just repeat back to you what you're saying? But having 3 or more of the following would be a specification for catatonia. So the basic pattern for schizophrenia is before becoming ill, and usually the onset for schizophrenia is in young adulthood, so that 18 to 26-year-old age range is when we see many of the diagnoses first start to manifest, including schizophrenia. And so usually the person, before all the symptoms come on, they might just start feeling different, And so they kind of start pulling away. I think if you ask, you would probably get responses like, I don't know, I just feel off. I don't know, I just feel weird, right? And then over time, the symptoms start to manifest more often, and with greater magnitude, until you eventually have the full-blown hallucinations. So at first, it might start with hallucinations, for example. It might start with, I swear I heard somebody talking. Oh well, and you move on. We've all been there, right? Where like I'm in my office alone, and I might hear a sound. I'm like, oh, that's somebody who's walking down the hallway. You go and look, and you say nobody's there. But this becomes more and more common for this individual. I keep hearing things, and then eventually they're at a point where I know it's happening. There's no way it's not happening. I hear things. I see things. No one else is seeing them. And now we're kind of in that category of full-blown hallucinations. The beliefs, right, start gradually. I'm special. I could do that. I could do that. I could do everything. I can do anything, right? And so it builds up. It's not like a light switch that just happens overnight. So then it starts interfering with work and social functioning. So one of my clients who had schizophrenia, he just could not keep a job because he believed that he had telepathy and that he could talk to his friends and other people via telepathy. And he heard people talking to him who would be kind of jumping in on the conversation, other telepathic people. And so he would get jobs at, like customer service jobs, so working at Home Depot or Lowe's or H-E-B, doing cashier work, and he's talking to people that are not there. But he would get into very heated arguments with these individuals, and he's doing this in front of customers, and of course that led to him getting fired over and over. And eventually, family and friends kind of pushing him away because the delusions and hallucinations were just making it so he had a hard time keeping those relationships. Again, it didn't just click on overnight. It gradually grew into that. So with psychotic symptoms and schizophrenia, these are a set of disorders that are going to be heavily medication dependent because these are very much neurological issues, right? There is a consistency problem with the gray and white matter in the brain. So psychosis is present. Medication can help with that. And in counseling, you might be helping them with other methods of reality testing and medication compliance, right? Because typically the pattern is I take the medication, the symptoms go away. I stop taking the medication, and then they come back. So we must kind of help them with that. And this is just kind of a review that the person has delusions or hallucinations, and we see that often, the disorganized behavior, disorganized speech, and the negative symptoms. And the last thing I'll go over, and then I'll leave you to the other videos and to the readings. I really encourage y'all to read the lycanthropy article because it's a great example of considering culture before just jumping into diagnosing, and I thought the authors did a good job of explaining the process. So schizoaffective is the least reliable diagnosis in the DSM, but essentially what this is it's schizo, meaning the psychotic disorder, and affective, meaning the mood. So here the person essentially alternates between being in a mood episode, depressive or manic, and when this episode kind of dies down, they're now having I guess I'll say a period of time or an episode where they're experiencing delusions and hallucinations. And there tends to be a pattern. There's no strict time limit or identifiable pattern listed in the DSM, but this client is essentially bouncing back and forth between being in a mood episode and being in a psychotic episode. I say it's the least reliable because there have been studies that have shown that when given case studies of this to clinicians, nobody can really agree on what schizoaffective looks like, as opposed to saying this is somebody who has, schizophrenia or schizophrenia and depression, or schizophrenia and bipolar, or depression or bipolar with the psychotic symptoms. So it's just something I caution you with using this one, just taking your time and making sure you understand your client's symptoms. That'll do it for this one. Check out the articles, and as always, if you have any questions or concerns, let me know, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.